This video contains spoilers for The Batman.
If you are justice, please do not lie. What is the price of your blind eye? Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this riddle, be sure to check out my 4-hour-long video essay on why Thomas Wayne is a fraud. Remember to smash that like button and subscribe.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I f***ing loved The Batman. It is quite literally everything I've ever asked for in a Batman story, and by far the greatest Batman movie we've ever received. Every aspect of it, from the performances, the story, the gorgeous cinematography, the soundtrack, every single aspect is pure Batman, and I honestly can't stop thinking about it. Far and away, my favorite part of the movie was the character arc that it put Bruce through. His decision to move on from being vengeance into becoming a symbol of hope for the people of Gotham is the single greatest thing that's ever been done with the character on screen. Not only does it perfectly understand what makes Batman special, but the superhero genre as a whole. Matt Reeves and everyone involved have truly achieved something special with this movie that I don't think I can really put into words. A lot of people are wondering what the future of this series is going to look like. For some reason, we still haven't gotten the green light on a sequel yet, but Reeves and Pattinson have been adamant about wanting to continue this story, and this movie is nothing like Batman because it is killing it at the box office. So I think it's pretty likely that we're going to see Rob don the pointy ears again. Personally, I see this being more of a single trilogy as opposed to a whole 12-movie-long saga spanning like 30 years, but as long as Matt has a story to tell, I will be 100% on board. However many movies it ends up being, I think that the second installment has so much potential to further Bruce's story, challenging him in new ways and forcing him to confirm decisions that he made in the last movie. Now, despite my mustache, I know I am not Matt Reeves. I'm not trying to impose my vision on top of his or anything like that. Whatever he does will be great. I'm just really excited by the potential of these future movies, and I want to throw out my ideas about how I think we could build off of what made the first movie so special. So here is my pitch for the sequel to The Batman. We open on the image of an 8-year-old boy. He struggles as he's duct taped to a chair by a mysterious figure. Oh boy, we're starting rough. You guys thought the Spider-Man video was fucked up. Oh boy. The boy tries to call out for his father, for anyone to help him, but nobody can hear him. As tape is placed over his mouth, the figure places his fingers to his lips and says a single word. Hush. Now, chances are this next movie is just going to be called The Batman Part 2 or The Batman Chapter 2, but I think it'd be pretty cool if they pulled from Matt Reeves' other work, the Planet of the Apes movies, and gave each of the sequels a different word of the Batman. You could do some cool stuff with it, like Night of the Batman for a Man-Bat movie, or Heart of the Batman for a Mr. Freeze movie, or in this instance, Silence of the Batman. We cut to Bruce Wayne as he's attending an event celebrating Wayne Industries' contributions to help rebuild Gotham after the flood. A lot of people have issues with how the Batman handles Bruce Wayne's different identities. People will say that Bruce Wayne is just the mask, Batman is who he really is inside, which that's a take that, in my opinion, oversimplifies Batman down to 2 simple layers, when in reality there's a lot more going on with the character. And my takeaway from this movie was that the way it handled Bruce's personas, for lack of a better term, is by framing that idea as a character flaw. In the movie, Bruce doesn't go out to be billionaire, playboy, philanthropist Bruce Wayne to throw people off about being Batman like he does in every other Batman movie. Instead, he sits in his cave, face smothered in eye makeup, Nirvana blasting at full volume, and dedicates absolutely 100% of his time to his mission, to being vengeance. And so, by the end of the movie, after he's recontextualized his idea of Batman and his mission, we can also assume that he would recontextualize his idea of Bruce Wayne and the impact that he could be making during the day, both to help the people of Gotham and also to atone for the sins of his father. Batman has to be a symbol of hope, but so does Bruce Wayne. So Bruce is using money to help repair Gotham and fix the flooding, reinforcing the dams that surround the city. It's been about a year since Riddler's attack, and in that time, about half of Gotham has been restored, but the parts that rest below sea level are still at risk. He believes in what he's doing with his money, but he doesn't want to be at these events. He thinks that he can be spending his time better by doing more work as Batman. It's during this scene where we're introduced to Tommy Elliot, the son of Edward Elliot, the reporter that Thomas Wayne had accidentally killed. After his father's death, Tommy was put into an orphanage. He grew up to be an incredibly successful surgeon, and he worked his way up from nothing and has built up a name for himself. In fact, it was Tommy Elliot who was the surgeon who saved Alfred's life in the first movie. That's not true. That's a blatant lie. I just needed an excuse to talk about Alfred. But it'd be cool. Be cool if they did that. I really enjoyed what they did with Alfred in the first movie. And I especially love Bruce learning just how important Alfred is to him and learning to accept him as a father figure. And I think in the sequels it could be interesting to use that new realization to create more conflict for Bruce. He was willing to let Alfred help him and train him before, but now, after almost losing him in the last movie, Bruce might be less willing to accept his help for fear of him getting hurt again. And so part of this arc for Bruce could be learning to accept that aspect of their relationship and understanding that Batman is bigger than just one person. Bruce and Tommy have a pretty strange relationship, firstly because, well, Bruce isn't exactly the most social guy in the world just yet, but mostly because the shadow of their father's past hang over them pretty much constantly. Bruce has been trying to make amends, and Tommy doesn't seem to hold any grudges, but still it's awkward. And then the bat signal lights up the night sky. Bruce dips away from the event to talk to Gordon. Marcus Ryder, the son of famed journalist Jack Ryder, has been reported missing. He didn't come home from school 2 days ago, and Gordon wasn't able to consider him a missing person until after 48 hours had passed. This can maybe set up how the new martial law that's been imposed has done an even worse job than the GCPD at protecting the people, which, oh boy, that's a low bar. Bruce, furious with how much time is lost already, rushes off. He tracks Marcus to an abandoned apartment building on the Lower East Side of the city, one that's almost completely submerged by the floods. We see Bruce has donned a newer, slimmer, and maybe even more colorful costume, and he uses a new high-speed boat to traverse the watery streets of Gotham in search for the missing boy. Probably not the best time to mention it, but I really liked how much the first movie was inspired by the 60s Adam West show. It was a nice touch, and I want to see more stuff like that. Anyway, back to the kidnapping. Bruce gets to the apartment building before the rest of the police do, and he's ambushed by something below the waters. A man covered in scales with razor-sharp teeth, Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc. I think after the gritty, down-to-earth, realistic story that was the first movie, now we can start to explore some of the more supernatural and comic booky things from the Batman mythos. Nothing crazy just yet, but some of the more simple villains that probably wouldn't be able to hold their own movie. We can establish that some of these characters, like Croc, have fit themselves into the gang wars of Gotham now that Falcone's been killed. I'm not calling him Falcone, you can't make me. And now that he's out of the picture, they're all trying to fill that power vacuum. I grew up, his name was Falcone. Batman gets his ass beat by Croc, but is eventually able to get the upper hand. He saves Marcus just in time for the police to get there. Gordon offers to take the kid home, but Bruce refuses. He trusts Gordon, but he doesn't trust the rest of the cops, saying that he'll take him to his father. He's not going to be Robin, calm down. The two of them ride in the boat together. Maybe we can get like a cute little moment where the kid and Bruce talk a little bit and we have like some fun little banter, I guess. But that nice moment comes to an end when Bruce opens the door to Ryder's home to see a pool of blood. Without a moment's hesitation, he drops down to his knees and grabs Marcus by his shoulders. Close your eyes and wait outside. You don't need to see this. Jack Ryder has been killed. The police detail that was protecting him is nowhere to be seen. The room where his body's been found is covered wall to wall in blood. His face has been brutally disfigured, leaving him unrecognizable. Bruce steps outside to do what he wished he had done in the last movie, and what he wished someone had done for him all those years ago. He detaches his cape and places it around Marcus. He wraps his arm around the boy and lets him sob into his chest. We cut to a Gotham rooftop. Killer Croc wakes up from being unconscious, tied to a chair, and as Batman attaches electrical charges to his body. He knows Jones isn't smart enough to pull something like this off, and despite being called Killer Croc, he's not a murderer. Not like that. I'm going to ask you one time. Who hired you? I don't know what you're talking about, man. Bruce turns on the power and Croc screams out in pain. I've got 50,000 more volts where that came from. Let's see how much those scales can take. Croc laughs. You think I'm scared of you? Everyone in Gotham knows you wouldn't hurt a fly. You've lost your edge, bats. Bruce scowls before amping up the power, but Croc doesn't talk until the pain becomes too much and he's knocked unconscious again. Bruce swears under his breath. He's chosen not to be vengeance, but at what cost? Gotham isn't afraid of him anymore, and it's hurting his ability to save lives, and Bruce is starting to question if it was worth it. Throughout the movie, I want to explore even more ramifications of Bruce coming into the light. With all the work that he's been doing to help the city, Bruce seems to have ruffled some feathers and is starting to uncover something deeper, something bigger than Bruce could possibly imagine. The same person who killed Jack Ryder starts killing more people. Reporters, politicians, anytime someone comes close to exposing this greater conspiracy, they're immediately silenced. What's worse is their faces are being completely disfigured and pieces of body parts from the victims are going missing. The media is calling this horrifying monster the Hush Killer. Alright, I might as well talk about it now. Batman Hush is not a good comic. If you like it, rock on. Good for you. It's really not for me. The art is great to the point where a lot of Jim Lee's splash pages have become definitive depictions of the Batman universe, but the story being told, it focuses more so on just introducing you to all the different Batman characters as opposed to telling a compelling story, especially a mystery, outside of like a few key moments that kind of only work out of context. And on top of that, some questionable ethics, racism from its writer, and it's a book that I don't really recommend to most people. That said though, Hush is a very interesting character that I really enjoy. In fact, the direct follow-up to Hush, Batman Heart of Hush by Paul Dini and Dustin Nguyen, is absolutely fantastic and truly dives into the real potential of the character. And because of that, I would absolutely love to see how Matt Reeves would go about adapting him after his terrifying recreation of the Riddler. Probably my favorite aspect of the first movie was how it placed itself firmly as a mystery noir film first and a superhero movie second. Finally, we get a Batman movie that explores the detective side of Detective Comics, and I want to continue that trend further. Unlike the Riddler, Hush is a killer that doesn't leave any clues. No riddles or puzzles, leaving crime scenes borderline untouched, aside from the massive pools of blood, I guess. This can challenge Batman even more as a detective, to chase down a killer who doesn't want to be found. And Bruce can begin to question himself. Not only the effectiveness of his new mission as Batman, but question whether or not it was worth it to step into the light and give back to the city. Sure, he's done some good as Bruce Wayne, but because of that, people are being killed, and he puts that blame on himself. With no other leads, Bruce has no choice but to do the unthinkable. We cut to him sitting in front of a cell, looking through the glass, his eyes full of both anger but desperation. the Riddler smiles as Batman sits across from him, begging for his help. This version of the Riddler is fucking fantastic. Without a doubt, one of the best villains we have ever received in a comic book movie. Paul Dano's performance as this terrifying Zodiac-style killer who, when unmasked, becomes a pathetic shell of what he wishes to be, is so compelling and layered, and I can't get enough of it. And so I think it'd be such a waste if we never got to see him again. Also, apparently I look like him.
This man looks exactly like the Riddler. Why is the Riddler reviewing the Batman?
Yo, you low-key look like Paul Dano.
Boy, is the Riddler confirmed?
Loved your performance as the Riddler.
It looks like Paul Dano Riddler. Like if you agree, this dude looks like the Riddler.
Hey! He looks like Paul Dano Riddler.
When I saw the Riddler in the theater, I immediately thought of Troy Boy looking like the Riddler. Low-key genuinely looked like the Riddler. It's like, we know it's you, Riddler. See, he looks like Paul Dano. For real, for real.
Is no one mentioning that Troy looks like the Riddler? You know how Joker is one bad day away from going crazy? I'm one shave away from blowing up Gotham's seawalls. So, Batman asks for Riddler's help in tracking down Hush. It's sort of a Hannibal Lecter-style relationship between the two of them. Batman doesn't know if he can trust him, and Riddler clearly has ulterior motives, but is still providing valuable information and advice. I just realized that Silence of the Batman and Silence of the Lambs are the same title. That wasn't intentional. I just needed a different word for Hush. Now, you might be thinking that this is all very similar to a deleted scene that was in the first movie, involving that one guy. Alright, I guess I should talk about the fucking Joker. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I am tired of the Joker. I am sick of that fucking clown. That cameo with Joker was without a doubt the weakest part of the Batman. It felt like something that was studio mandated in a movie that's otherwise filled with individuality and personality. I'm sure Barry Keoghan will do a great job in the role. He's already standing out from other performances in a way that I really like. But Jesus Christ, I would like to go 5 seconds in a Batman story without having that giggling little fuck shoved down my throat. That sounded sexual. It wasn't supposed to be. The reason I bring this up is because a scene that was cut from the movie where Batman goes to this version of Joker to ask for advice on the Riddler case. I think it's best cut for a bunch of different reasons, and one of those reasons is because there's so much more potential in a whole movie for that concept as opposed to just one scene. Especially with someone like Riddler as opposed to the Joker, because we've already established him and Batman's relationship. So for this movie, I could see Joker being another small cameo, not like setting him up to be a major villain or anything, but existing within the environment as a reminder for Bruce of the worst that people can be capable of, and also how Batman's existence and his actions in the last movie are leading to more people like him to come from the shadows. Alright, can I stop talking about the Joker forever now? So throughout the second act, Bruce keeps investigating to find Hush as he kills more and more people. The investigation takes him to interrogate a ton of different suspects, and we start to see how the floods have changed the city. It's pretty obvious the next movie is going to pull a little bit from Batman Zero Year, where Riddler floods all of Gotham, as well as Batman No Man's Land, where after an earthquake, Gotham is considered no longer part of the United States and martial law is declared. This has a lot of potential to go deeper into a discussion of systemic issues that I think the first movie wasn't able to. We see that the rich have taken to the skies, building blimps and zeppelins to get away from the suffering below, always reminding the disenfranchised on the ground how powerless they are. Maybe this is how we can bring Penguin into all this, mainly because he was one of the best parts of the last movie and I need to see more of him. And so then, on the ground below, crime is more rampant than ever and people are trying to take advantage of the new environment. I've already talked about Killer Croc, but there's even this guy strapping a big kite to his back and flying around stealing things.
Man, hell yeah.
Basically, with the people in power having given up on Gotham, we can see the effects that they and the system as a whole have over the people that live there. One of the ways that Bruce chooses to help is by using Wayne money to build new affordable housing by refitting existing skyscrapers and high-rises, starting with Wayne Tower. He also offers to buy everybody one free Batman calzone only available at Little Caesars, and they say there are no good billionaires. Now don't tell Ben Shapiro this, but I really love the political commentary that the first movie had. In my opinion, the character of Batman is at his best when his stories are utilized to show the failings of modern society. The guy's a rich dude who runs around and tries to stop crime. It only makes sense to make his story about learning the roots of where that crime comes from. But my biggest issue with it is that it never really talks about systemic issues, rather instead framing a lot of the problems in Gotham as a result of bad actors and individuals like corrupt cops and mob bosses. I think for what the movie is trying to do, it worked fine, and I absolutely adore how much this Batman hates cops, but I do think that the sequels could use this opportunity to really dive deep into bigger and broader issues like this. And Bruce has to make the realization that taking down one crime boss or one supervillain isn't gonna fix the world. And I think the best way to address that is through Selina Kyle. Selina in this movie is the fucking coolest. Easily the best depiction of Catwoman we've ever seen on screen. Zoe Kravitz brings so much depth and nuance to the role. You can feel every ounce of her background and every line, every expression, every movement. Her and Rob have great chemistry, and I think it would be an absolute waste to not bring her back for future movies, especially given the character's role in the comics. So Bruce runs into Selina as she's stealing from him. He didn't know she was back in town, and she's wearing a newer costume to better represent her interests. Bruce catches her in the act, but he's not able to reveal himself as Batman, so their dynamic has completely changed. Throughout the movie, the two of them keep running into each other at the Wayne events as she's been swindling different rich people of their jewelry. Stealing from rich people's fun, come on. And here we can explore some of that internal conflict for Bruce. She can call out some of the mistakes he's made as Bruce Wayne and the flaws in the system. She sees him trying to fix things, but having been burned by people in power so often in her life, she doesn't trust his intentions. And throughout the movie, she can learn to understand him better, and she can be the one to reaffirm the importance of Batman staying in the light as a symbol of hope, and to also point at some of the sources of the bigger problems in Gotham. I also think there's a really interesting story with Bruce considering revealing his identity to Selina, but I kind of already did that in the Spider-Man pitch, so I'm not gonna do that. Batman gets buried in the graves of his parents. With Riddler's help, Bruce is only able to come up with one lead on the identity of Hush, Thomas Elliot. What little DNA evidence Bruce has points directly to Tommy, but Bruce isn't entirely convinced. Hush is killing reporters, journalists, people on the brink of exposing the deeper truth about Gotham, silencing them. Although we know about his father and what happened to him, it just doesn't make sense for Tommy. There's no motive. But still, Bruce is suspicious of Tommy, to the point where Tommy even comes to Bruce late one night in Wayne Tower begging for his help. He says that he stumbled upon something serious, something bigger than the Waynes or the Arkhams or anything we have any idea about, and he thinks people are after him. Bruce's suspicion and pessimism get the better of him, and in that split second of uncertainty, we hear a gunshot. Tommy looks down to see a bullet hole in his chest. Tommy Elliot falls into Bruce's arms. Bruce looks up to see the vague shape of a sniper on the rooftop a block over as he makes his escape. Bruce has Alfred call an ambulance, suits up, and chases after the shooter. Batman catches up with Hush. They fight a bit and he manages to pin him down. Bruce peels the bandages off his face to reveal Commissioner James Gordon. Bruce is shocked. His ally, his friend. A killer? Why would he do this? Without a word, Gordon throws Batman off of him and the two of them fight. But something's wrong. Bruce has known Gordon for almost 3 years now. He's seen him fight. He's a good fighter, a great fighter. He was trained as a Green Beret, but not this good. Gordon is showing a level of training and skill that just doesn't add up. During their fight, Bruce throws a flashbang grenade. The bright light stuns Gordon and he keels over. Out of breath, he looks around, confused. He looks to Batman and then down at his surroundings. Gordon has no idea how he got here, and he has no memory from the last 3 hours. Bruce takes Gordon to get a medical exam in the Batcave, and he starts to put the pieces together. The reason he couldn't track down Hush is because there is no Hush to track down. For the entire time, through some kind of extreme form of hypnosis or brainwashing, innocent people have been taken control of and manipulated into being killers, killing their friends, their family, their loved ones, and all having no memory of it. This Batman is used to having an answer, a single solution, one person to point the finger at. To rip that away from him and force him to think about the case and about his city in a new way would be the reality check that he needs to really grow. Tommy was right. Whatever this is, whoever's really behind this, it's so much bigger than Bruce could possibly imagine. Whoever they are, they only have one goal: to suppress the people of Gotham, manipulate them, silence them, force them into submission. Bruce gets a call from Alfred. The ambulance that he called for Tommy showed up, and nobody was there. There's blood on the floor, but Tommy's body just vanished. It's like he got up and walked away. He and Gordon make their way to Tommy's apartment, hoping to find some answers. They open the door in horror to see what looks like a makeshift prison cell. Furniture's been removed, the windows are barred, markings and messages in dried blood paint the walls. Tommy Elliot was involved in this, but not how Bruce originally thought. We discovered that when Tommy was put in the orphanage, he was immediately taken out by a mysterious force, subjected to constant hypnosis and brainwashing to the point of destroying his mind and turning him into an empty shell of a human. Locked away when he's not under their control, since then he's been a pawn, used by the secret society with one express purpose: to destroy Gotham's hope. After every victim had been killed before any police were notified, Tommy Elliot would arrive on the scene with a scalpel. Photos of the Hush victims are scattered across Tommy's prison, each with a portion of their face circled. Batman takes the photos and stacks them on top of each other before shining a light underneath them to reveal, "Ladies and gentlemen, your guest of honor, Bruce Wayne!" We cut to the ballroom of Wayne Tower, at the event celebrating the new housing that's been created. Selina's in the crowd, hoping to score off of some more rich people, but the audience is filled with mostly the lower income and disenfranchised who needed the affordable housing. They all begin to clap as a man steps out onto the stage. Bruce Wayne's face is covered in gruesome scars and stitches, as Tommy Elliot performed surgery on himself against his will to change his face and destroy Bruce's reputation. To tell Gotham that nobody cares about them, that there's no hope. Tommy begins to give a speech to the horrified crowd as a shadow befalls the room and Batman leaps down from the skylight above. Bruce tries to reason with Tommy, but Tommy's mind is so far gone that he's forced to fight him. Before Bruce is able to take him down, Tommy takes out a live grenade and tosses it down an elevator shaft. The building begins to shake as the structure holding up the room begins to crumble. Rubble begins falling and trapping people, and the site of the explosion starts to collapse in on itself. As Gordon gets a hold of Tommy, Batman tries to stop any further damage. He attaches his grappling hook and holds the foundation of the building together, but it's taking all of his strength and it's getting harder and harder. He looks to see the hundreds of people panicking, getting lost in the damage, trapped under rubble. He's not able to do everything at once, but he doesn't have to. Bruce hears a familiar voice. How can we help? And he turns his head to see Marcus Ryder, the boy from the beginning, alongside Gordon, the mayor, even Selina, and dozens of other people of Gotham, standing before him, inspired by the Batman, ready to help. DC has had a bit of a Batman problem lately. For years, it felt like the company wanted to do everything in their power to make the character and everything surrounding him as dark and edgy and violent as possible. And if not changing Batman, it's changing their other characters to be more like Batman. It's part of the reason why for so long I've neglected to call myself a Batman fan, because I just found I wasn't identifying with the majority of Batman media that was out there. That all changed with the Batman. This movie reminded me why I love the character. He doesn't represent pain or anger or rage or loss, but something greater than that. He represents taking those emotions, all of the suffering that you felt in your life, all the injustices you faced, and enduring them, turning them around and molding them to become a force for good. He's a symbol of hope for anyone suffering the same thing, telling them that everything will be okay. Bruce looks at Marcus. He still sees that pain and that sadness in his eyes from losing his father that hasn't gone away, but his eyes are filled with something else too. Determination. The drive to help others. The drive to be a hero. Bruce smiles at Marcus as he and the others go to help everyone evacuate the building. They help escort people out, rescue the injured, all because of that shining light in the sky told them that they could. But then, as the last civilian leaves the building, a piece of the ceiling falls on top of Marcus, trapping him underneath. Gordon, Selina, and the others aren't able to lift it off of him. Bruce panics. He's not able to let go of his grapple, or else the whole building could fall and kill hundreds of people. He looks around to see Tommy, dazed and in a state of confusion. With the last ounce of his strength, he throws a flashbang at Tommy in the hopes of snapping him out of his hypnosis. But it's no use. Whatever's been done to him is far more damaging than what was done to Gordon or the others, and it's going to take more than that to save him. Bruce calls out to Tommy. Tommy, if you can hear me, please. We need your help. You have to break this. Prove to them. Prove to everyone. Deep down, you're a good man. Tommy slowly begins to stand up, and using every ounce of his energy, he grabs a hold of the rubble, and it's just the strength that was needed to save Marcus. With everyone safe, Bruce releases the grapple and they escape from the collapsing building. When the dust clears, we see that they did it. They saved everybody. All except one. The amount of strain Tommy put on his body burst the stitches in his bullet wound. He collapses to the ground, his chest bloody, as Bruce holds him in his arms. He leans in close to Bruce and whispers something in his ear, before suddenly his mouth begins to foam, a remote-activated cyanide pill. Bruce looks up, his eyes filled with anger and sadness. The only thing he can think of are Tommy's last words. We cut to Arkham Asylum at the Riddler's cell. Batman barges through the door. "So you finally figured it out," Riddler says. "The Rata Alata. A rat with wings. Not a falcon, not a bat." Tommy's voice echoes in Bruce's mind. "They watch you in your hearth. They watch you in your bed. Speak not a whispered word of them, or they'll send the talon for your head." Riddler smiles. "An owl."
Bro, you gotta go read Court of Owls.
Court of Owls is the best one.
The Court of Owls are such a fantastic addition to the Batman lore and rogues gallery, and I think that using them as the big bad of the series would set it apart from other Batman movies and further the mystery conspiracy theme throughout. I think using them as a metaphor for systemic issues and things beyond Bruce's control can go a long way toward exploring new themes and ideas that would fit right along in the Reeves universe. Bruce stands over Tommy Elliott's grave, thinking on the events of the last few months. This man, who was a victim of the system and the world around him, turned from an innocent child into a lifeless shell, never to be remembered or honored, still saved a life. Despite everything that the world threw at him, despite everything it did to knock him down, Tommy Elliott was a hero. This Court of Owls used Tommy because they thought he was insignificant, and Bruce only found out because of his personal connections with him. But how many Tommy Elliots are there in Gotham? In the world? If he hadn't been there to save Marcus, could he have become one of them? Easily my favorite Batman story is Batman War on Crime by Paul Dini and Alex Ross. It's a short book, just a one-shot that's about 30 pages. The art is, of course, insanely gorgeous, but it's a book that really stands out to me as perfectly showcasing what Batman should represent. In short, it follows Bruce as he uses his resources as Batman and Bruce Wayne to help a neighborhood in Gotham. He encounters a boy named Marcus, who also lost his parents, in one of the most touching moments we've ever seen in a Batman story. At the end of the book, Bruce states that he knows he can't completely win this war. He knows he can't stop crime forever. But the small victories, like Marcus, they encourage him and push him to keep going and keep trying. Bruce places a flower on Tommy's grave. He used to blame himself for the deaths of Hush's victims. He believed that coming to the light is what led to them being killed. And he's only half right. Their deaths are on his conscience, but not because he came to the light, because he didn't do it soon enough. And now he has to catch up with the darkness of the world around him and bring the rest of Gotham into that light. Into Batman's light. Above all else, though, after everything that's happened, after everything he's gone through, Bruce walks away with one very important lesson. The Batman needs to be bigger than one person. There are so many different directions that this next movie could go, it's really refreshing. I went this way, but there's so much potential for other villains like Mr. Freeze or Man-Bat, or fuck it, let's get a Condiment King movie, that the possibility for the series is limitless. And that to me is what marks the sign of great world building and a great director. It might still be a little too early for a Robin, we can't say for sure. Personally, I think that there's a lot of room to skip the origin and adapt a story like Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen's Robin and Batman book, which showcased the early days of Robin as Bruce had to figure out what their relationship was supposed to be. It's a very good book, I really recommend it. I think that story, on top of the two of them taking on the Court of Owls, could be a great finale to a potential trilogy. I also recognize that this version of Hush is really different from the comics. Tommy in the source material he's a pretty terrible guy, and that sheer evilness is why I and a lot of other people like him so much. So I'm not sure how I feel about giving them that kind of heroic send-off. I'm sure Hush fans might not be too big a fan of that, but I'm just hoping that there are bigger Court of Owl fans to cancel that out. But the main thing I wanted to focus on with this was maintaining the tone and direction from the first movie and building upon the things I loved in new ways. Because there's a lot to love about this movie. It's a movie that fully understands everything that Batman should be and everything a superhero should be. The Batman is absolutely fantastic, and Matt Reeves is on track to making one of the best superhero film series of all time, and I cannot wait to see where he goes from here.
Anyway, thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and leave a comment about what you want to see from the Batman 2. Be sure to check out my weekly podcast, Fanboy Talk. Special thanks to Also the Sting, Cassidy Bond, Fallen, Iron Ninja, Jonah, Corey's Not Fresh, I'm Spice XL, Logan Triplet Films, Ryder Harrison, Sprifty, The Artsy Fartsy Guy, Tim Neufeld, Tyler Goodrich, Yobi Perkins, Zachary Stonebreaker, Zero to Hero 148, and ZZ Toasty for making spectacular fanboys on my Patreon. It's Metroid Boy 17 coming at you live. Remember that Thomas Wayne is a fraud, be responsible, and I'll see you around.